campaign to boycott Canada's largest grocer this Wednesday night. Why shoppers are urged to protest Loblaw as its profits soar.
The last thing you want is your loyal customers to sample the competition.
Will a boycott have any impact? Escalating conflict on campus.
You have been warned.
The push to remove protesters fighting to stand their ground. Busted where Canada's most wanted fugitive was caught. Meticulous search what Saskatoon police are looking for in this landfill. And new clues in a decades-old mystery on a Canadian movie set.
It seemed like it affected people in many, many different ways.
Who laced the chowder that left Titanic film workers stoned?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The cost of groceries and the profits of retailers are front and center again. Canada's largest food and drug retailer, Loblaw, is reporting a big jump in profits. Loblaw reported profit of more than $459 million in the first quarter of 2024, a jump of nearly 10% from a year ago. The retailer also raised its quarterly dividend for its shareholders by 15%. Its stock is up too, closing in on a record high in March. Loblaw says people are choosing to shop in greater numbers at their stores, and that's partly why profits are up. But some disgruntled customers are still pushing ahead with a boycott. And Gaviola has our top story tonight.
A call to boycott grocery behemoth Loblaw's and all its different brands across the country, including Shoppers Drug Mart, Pharmaprix, Superstore, and No Frills.
Are you ready to take down Galen Weston Jr. and Loblaw's?
The movement started online in a Reddit discussion among angry shoppers. It spiraled from there. In a statement to Global News, Loblaw said customers are noticing in those same Reddit groups that they're getting real value at our stores, often the best across the industry. So will avoiding Loblaw stores for the month make a difference to one of Canada's biggest grocery retailers? Probably not right away.
Whether or not their reputation has taken a hit or not is not going to actually impact their bottom line. It's going to take a lot more to bring down a Canadian retailer like this.
But if people switch to a rival...
The number one thing in retailing that you need is store traffic. And the last thing you want is your loyal customers to sample the competition. So I think on a secondary level, it could hurt Loblaw.
Alternatives are limited, though, in some parts of the country.
This is especially true for those that live in rural areas of Canada and smaller towns.
Champagne has been courting foreign grocers to enter the Canadian market.
What people want is more choice, which leads to better prices. And that's why you see, I always said to the head of the grocery chains in the country, listen to customers.
But so far, no deals.
The boycott begins on the heels of news that Ottawa's grocery task force hasn't conducted any probes, and it doesn't have an enforcement mandate, even if it does uncover problems. Donna?
All right, and Gaviola in Toronto, thanks. Shopping at London Drugs is still not an option. All of its stores remain closed for a fourth day. On Sunday, the retailer shut down across Western Canada because of what it calls a cybersecurity incident. It says it's working with a third-party cybersecurity expert, but has not explained exactly what happened. It promises to notify customers if any personal data was exposed. It's years behind schedule and tens of billions of dollars over budget, but oil is now flowing through the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, which the federal government bought in 2018. The expansion means more Canadian crude is now being shipped from Alberta to the BC coast. It nearly triples the flow of oil to 890,000 barrels per day, and it expands access to lucrative global markets beyond the U.S. Trans Mountain's original owner, Kinder Morgan, walked away from it, and Prime Minister Trudeau's decision to buy it for $4.5 billion was deeply controversial. The cost to complete it has since ballooned to a staggering $34 billion. Heather Yourex-West explains what Canadians are getting from that investment.
Controversial and expensive, twinning Western Canada's Trans Mountain pipeline proved to be a nearly impossible task. Seeing its completion has many in Canada's energy sector breathing a heavy sigh of relief.
It's a big deal. We've been waiting for this for many years. It's hard to build big pipelines. And getting this done, although it's been very expensive and very delayed, is finally something that's going to give market access to Canada, which is one of the bigger oil producers in the world.
Until now, Canada has only been able to export its oil to North American markets, sending its heavy crude by pipeline or rail across Western Canada to the American Midwest or the Gulf Coast. But the TMX pipeline expansion will allow Canada to export directly to international customers via the Pacific Ocean, with new buyers in California, China, and India.
The average taxpayer will see some impact. This will bump our economy. I think it was the Bank of Canada that forecasted it bump the GDP up by 0.25%. This one single project, which is a big deal.
Of course, as the owner of much of Canada's oil resource, Alberta stands to see the most financial gains, with provincial royalty payments tied to the price of Western Canadian crude, which because of its limited market access has sold at a steep discount.
Because we now have another customer to sell to, we're going to see higher prices for all of our Western Canada Select product. In the past, there's been a heavy discount. I've been told by my department officials it's probably a couple of $2 billion additional revenues that we would get.
While the new pipeline may be pumping, the TMX story is far from done. It's still owned by taxpayers, and Ottawa has made clear its intention to divest, with questions around how long the infrastructure will be profitable as the world makes its transition away from what's flowing inside. Heather, Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
The leader of the official opposition was back in the House of Commons today after being kicked out yesterday for using language the Speaker of the House deemed unparliamentary. Here's a little bit of a taste from yesterday.
The leader opposite is showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like. He shakes the hands of a leader of a white nationalist group, then goes to actively court the support of the group's members and thinks he can get away with it.
That, like everything else he says, is false. When will we put an end to this wacko policy by this wacko Prime Minister?
No. There are a couple of things which are going on here today, which is not acceptable.
Well, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was ejected after that, and the rest of the Conservative caucus followed him. Today, they were all back, and our chief political correspondent David Akin was watching to see how everyone would behave. David.
Well, Donna, if Tuesday's question period was remarkable for its rancor, today's was just as remarkable for its tranquility. Here's an example of the tone of today's exchanges.
Will he announce now that his experiment with legalizing hard drugs in BC is over? Yes or no?
It was like that for an hour. No name calling on any side. The backbenchers all staying silent, with little or no clapping and definitely no heckling. Everyone on their best behavior. The Conservatives say they took that approach because they want to focus on the drug crisis in BC and elsewhere, and were not interested in picking a spat with what they see as a partisan speaker, Liberal MP Greg Fergus. But the Prime Minister tried to pick a fight several times, repeating Tuesday's accusations that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives pander to white nationalists.
The Leader of the Opposition has not answered Canadians' concerns about why he will not condemn Diagolon, the far-right extremist organization, why he will not reject the endorsement of Alex Jones, noted conspiracy theory.
The day before, those had been the opening salvos to that out-of-control question period. But today, Poilievre brushed off the bait and stuck to his focus, the drug crisis.
This is the Prime Minister who has to answer the people who are dying every day due to his policies.
Now, speaking to some MPs from all parties, don't expect this perfectly civil approach to last. It really was a one-day response to Tuesday's tantrums. Expect a degree of heckling, cheering, and jeering to return as soon as Thursday's question period. Donna?
Okay, David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Winnipeg police say they have cracked what they say was an interprovincial drug network. Police call it a complex financial and criminal investigation. Investigators today showcased what they've seized: cash, guns, drugs, and jewelry. 14 people are facing charges related to organized crime. Police allege millions of dollars in illicit drugs and guns were being trafficked into Winnipeg from Toronto.
This network used various importation methods that include bus, rail, and airline companies, as well as highway-based couriers who used vehicles outfitted with custom-designed concealment compartments.
The investigation involved more than 10 police services across Canada, including Via Rail Police. A pro-Palestinian encampment at Montreal's McGill University will remain in place for now. A Quebec judge has rejected a request for an injunction that would have forced the protesters to leave.
We want divestment!
The request filed by 2 McGill students yesterday asked the court to ban protests within 100 meters of McGill's buildings. The students said the protests create a hostile environment on campus and were concerned for their safety. In a 10-page decision, the judge wrote there was insufficient evidence of the urgency in the request. Several universities in the U.S. have run out of patience with the protests. Classes at UCLA have been canceled after what happened last night. Police were deployed in force after supporters of Israel clashed with pro-Palestinian demonstrators. And at Columbia University in New York, hundreds of people were arrested after officers moved in there to clear protesters. While the demands among the protests vary, the majority are asking for their schools to divest from Israel in some form. Jackson Prosco reports on the escalating disruption.
You have been warned as per City College to leave the campus.
New York police descended on Columbia's campus after dark. Raiding the building, dozens of pro-Palestinian protesters had barricaded themselves inside, evicting and arresting nearly 300 people who had refused to leave.
Well, those who broke into the building did include students. It was led by individuals who are not affiliated with the university.
The university and police had become concerned by what they saw as a dangerous escalation. For weeks, Columbia has been the center of the national student protests.
It's not okay under any circumstance to send that many police onto campus.
Across the U.S., it's clear police and school administrators have reached a breaking point. In Madison, Wisconsin, fighting erupted as officers tried to remove tents Wednesday. At UCLA, a chaotic scene as pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian supporters sparred overnight.
We had people mazing us, beating us with bats and sticks, throwing whatever they could to us.
Nationwide, more than 1,400 people have now been arrested. The turmoil has spilled off campuses and into the political arena, where politicians are split on whether the protests constitute free speech or hate speech.
These students should be praised for standing up for what they believe in, not vilified.
These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate.
Back at Columbia, the tents are gone, but there are worries protesters could return. Police say they will remain on guard until students graduate later this month, capping off a tumultuous school year. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
In Gaza, World Central Kitchen has resumed operations a month after 7 of its aid workers were killed by Israeli airstrikes. The charity has nearly 300 trucks carrying about 8 million meals ready to enter at the Rafah crossing. In northern Gaza, aid is also finally getting through the Erez crossing, which Israel has reopened a month after it promised to do so to try to address the hunger crisis in Gaza. The American Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is in the region for the 7th time since October 7th. He met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, and again, he's urging Israel and Hamas to move ahead with a ceasefire proposal.
There is no time for delay. There's no time for further haggling. The deal is there. They should take it.
Blinken also restated American opposition to an Israeli invasion of Rafah without a plan to effectively protect civilians. Violence is erupting in Georgia tonight. That country's parliament moved a step closer to passing a law critics fear will stifle media freedom and endanger its bid to join the European Union. Riot police used water cannon, tear gas and pepper spray on protesters who were trying to break into Parliament. It's been called the Foreign Agent Bill. The legislation calls for organizations to register as being under foreign influence if they receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad. The bill must pass one more vote before it becomes law. Arrested development coming up where Canada's most wanted fugitive was just caught and what he's accused of. The search for Canada's most wanted fugitive is over. He's been arrested in Prince Edward Island. On Tuesday night, police in Charlottetown caught 35-year-old Michael Beebe at a local business after receiving tips he was in PEI. There was a Canada-wide warrant for his arrest. He was wanted for second-degree murder in the fatal shooting of 29-year-old Shamar Powell Flowers. He was killed on the Danforth in Toronto in July of 2023. Beebe will now be transported back to Ontario in the coming days. And that means this guy moves up a notch to become Canada's most wanted fugitive. Al Boivin is wanted in Quebec for drug trafficking. Police in Saskatoon have started searching a landfill today as they look for the remains of a 22-year-old woman who has been missing for more than 3 years. Excavators, along with officers in full protective gear, were seen sifting through garbage this morning. It marks the beginning of what investigators say will be a month-long search for Mackenzie Lee Trottier. She was last seen in December of 2020.
The enormous amount of work that's going on behind us is staggering. The search is about Mackenzie, but it's also about missing people. No matter what their past is, they're human beings, and they deserve our attention.
Saskatoon police say new information led them to an area of interest in the landfill, about 930 cubic meters in size. As part of its 2024 budget, the federal government is moving ahead with changes to Canada's asylum claim system, which could speed up the deportation process. Canada has a record number of asylum seekers and a ballooning backlog of applications. Mackenzie Gray looks at what the changes are and what they could mean. Mackenzie.
Well, Donna, buried deep in the federal budget's legislation are 22 pages worth of changes to Canada's asylum system that the Liberals say will be big.
The budget promises to simplify and streamline the asylum claims process in support of faster decisions and quicker removals.
They are mostly public safety related. They are efficiencies within the system that I think we can take a look at.
The efficiencies include increased powers to help the Canada Border Services Agency enforce removals, making it harder for denied refugee claimants to access other immigration streams, and simplify the process for minors to apply. But overall, only small changes.
I don't see anything revolutionary in here that's all of a sudden overnight going to clear the backlog. However, anything that you can do to make any step of the million steps of the process a little bit faster will have the end result of speeding up the system.
A system that's currently under major pressure. For the first 3 months of 2024, asylum claims are up 62% from the previous year, with over 46,000 new claims. The Immigration and Refugee Board backlog is now at a record 186,000 applicants, well over what they can handle.
The tribunal has admitted publicly they only have the capacity of dealing with 50,000 a year. They're resourced for that.
The federal budget does promise more cash to address the backlog, $750 million over 5 years, but if that doesn't help fix the system, the former immigration minister believes the Canadian consensus that immigration is a positive could be under threat.
I'm really worried about the last few months. It was surprising for me to see the backlog grow. It's going to take a big effort to get it back under control.
Despite new money and legislative changes, the current immigration minister was unwilling to put a target for how long asylum claims should take to process, Donna, but right now lawyers say it can take up to 3 years before a claim's decided.
All right, Mackenzie in Ottawa, thanks. Workers' rights ahead, how some May Day rallies in Europe turned violent. It is May 1st, recognized as May Day in many countries when workers and activists mark workers' rights. Most of the protests today were peaceful, but in some places tension boiled over. This is Istanbul. Police there used tear gas and fired rubber bullets to disperse large crowds. They were trying to break through a barricade to reach Taksim Square in defiance of a ban on demonstrations there. 40,000 officers were deployed and more than 200 people were arrested. And this is Paris. Riot police moved in when protesters got out of hand. Demonstrators torched vehicles and damaged bus shelters. Police say at least 12 officers were hospitalized after a homemade explosive was set off. Who done it next? The mystery of a meal that drugged the cast and crew of the film Titanic. The story of the Titanic and how it went down has been told over and over again, but there is still a mystery around something that happened during the filming of the movie Titanic. Crew members working on that film in Nova Scotia back in 1996 got mysteriously high after eating seafood chowder. Heidi Petrachuk reports on the new information that's come to light and the lingering question of who spiked the soup.
I'm flying! Titanic was an Oscar-winning blockbuster.
It's definitely the biggest movie I ever worked on.
And the movie's modern-day scenes were filmed in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Artist Marilyn McAvoy was there. That's her on the left.
I'll be goddamned.
The film is now well known for its emotionally explosive set and ballooning budget. But an incident in August of 1996 may not ring as familiar. That's when 80 crew members, McAvoy included, unknowingly ate drug-tainted lobster chowder on set.
You know, it was kind of like very dreamy, very surreal. I was still functioning. I wasn't, nauseous or anything like that. But it seemed like it affected people in many, many different ways. This is me, and this is Jim Cameron.
It took hours to triage and treat everyone at the ER, an experience star Bill Paxton would describe years later.
You see some people are freaking out, some people are Congo dancing, some people are euphoric. I knew I was pretty stoned on something pretty bad.
Everyone recovered. Nova Scotia health officials determined the chowder contained PCP, or angel dust, a hallucinogenic drug. Police investigated, but no one was ever charged. Now, more details are being revealed in an incident report released Monday by Halifax Police, following a ruling from the Provincial Privacy Commissioner. But there are no names and no clear culprit. According to the document, one witness told police a food services worker, quote, removed from the set for selling drugs a few days prior, could be a suspect. Officers couldn't confirm the worker's identity. Police also uncovered rumors the incident may have provided a reason to continue shooting for an additional week, with funding coming from an insurance claim. But the investigator writes none of this can be substantiated, adding, imagine the tabloid headlines.
Like many things that happened on that movie, I think it's just kind of become this kind of, lore.
But unlike the dramatic, now iconic ending to Titanic, it seems this story will remain without its Hollywood ending. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Someone knows who did it. That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Sierra Canada is near Hinton, Alberta. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.